First up is Stephanie, and one point I'd like to make is that for Stephanie and everybody else, the Stephanie's got this first post, but also another post down here. And just for organizational purposes, I prefer if you keep everything in one thread. So if you kept adding, for example, to this one below, just add comments, and it just helps keep things a little more organized. Not a big deal, but it helps a little bit. The other thing also valuable to everyone is that these images are good reference images. I like the room. These shapes are interesting on these chairs and the good colors, and the slingshot looks good, but the it looks like you've put this image in the Maya file, and one thing that's important to understand is that images are not embedded in Maya files, that Maya just points to those images. So this is a bit small to really see, and I can't see it in the Maya file because it's not included in the Maya file. Let's jump over to Maya, and I can see this scene. If I you'll notice I don't see this image plane either, and the reason for that is if I go to Attribute Editor, I hit Control A, here's the path of the image, and look, it shows users, Stephanie, James, etc., etc. It's in your Documents folder on your computer, so obviously I don't have it. The way to include these things is if I say File, Archive Scene, and then I say Yes, Continue, and then I can see down here it's created this zip file. And that zip file, if it were the case that I had the image here, would include the Maya file and the necessary image file all in one zip, and then when I unzipped it and open it, I would have the associated image or image files. So just an important note. And then as far as this, I just you didn't have to do modeling yet, but it's good that you did. You might try doing, instead of a torus, you could try like a pipe. So create polygon primitives, pipe, and once you have it, you can adjust the thickness in that direction. We've got the subdivisions around the axis if you want a little smoother, and you can do you can make various adjustments, but the other thing is, once this is here, if I take this edge, there we go, I'm just double clicking, shift double click, and then I could move this around kind of like the image. I guess it's like a smaller circle near the top, maybe scale it in this way, something like that. And then if you wanted to kind of then round the edges, I might take this and that and this and that, and shift right mouse click, bevel edge, and just decrease that. Maybe add a segment or two. And to me that looks, like a little bit closer to what you want for the back of those chairs, rather than what you have here. But yeah, again, we have I think it's like module 10 that we actually build the environment, but I just wanted you guys to get a head start on the design. But yeah, I think this environment's the right kind of idea. Make sure it's fully fleshed out from one camera angle. You've got your reference image to help with that, so that should work well. And again, I wasn't really able to see the drawing, but from what I saw, it looked a little bit kind of rushed and sketchy and not necessarily that helpful, so you might want to do something a little bit more careful. But again, I didn't really get to see the image clearly, so maybe you can post that later. Next up is Hend, and yeah, I can't, again, I can't see this image file in the Maya file unless you create an archive scene, which I mentioned in a previous critique. But that's all right, doesn't matter because I have the sketch right here. Yeah, and I think this is the right idea for the kind of scope of what we want to build. It's sort of a limited area, enough area for a character to move around in. You've got a fair amount of props. I think the thing to take it to the next level is to add more personality to it. Something that reveals a little bit about the character, what kind of person they are, or maybe a little bit about their backstory. Add some props, or other things that kind of help tell the story of who the character is. What kind of things would they keep in their home? Are they a student? Are they a professional? What country do they live in? Is there some sort of kind of drama or problem in their lives? Think about these kinds of things and then add in sort of props and other details that would help flesh out that story. But yeah, good photo reference. All of this stuff is really helpful and very much appreciated. And I think that, it's a good example to the rest of the class. The more photo reference, the better. In the professional world, they always have loads of photo reference for everything we do. Nothing is just kind of drawn from the imagination. It's either got artwork that's been created or photo reference. So the more the merrier. So a nice good collection of that and a good sketch. So nice job. Okay, this is Maddie, and Maddie did the archive scene, so I am able to see her drawings inside of Maya. Yeah, it's a very clean schematic view of things, which is going to help a lot with laying things out. Looks like a bar with a dartboard and some images. I'm not sure. I guess that's the bar and the bar stools from above. Is that what we're looking at? Okay. They look a little small from the top, maybe, and they don't actually seem to be lined up. Like if that's the width of this table here, I guess. It doesn't seem to quite line up with that, so you might try to get these to line up a little bit better, if that's the intention. Yeah, I think good concepts. I think the other thing you really need is a whole bunch of photo reference. What kind of tables, what kind of stools, what kind of barrels, what kind of dartboard, all that kind of stuff. Where you can have a lot of inspiration for all the details of these objects and their sort of peculiarities and flaws and all those kinds of things. So good general layout, very clear drawing, and all that's good. But I think you also need a lot of reference for the look of everything and the overall look of the scene. Next up is Tia, and yeah, it looks like you're going for a bit of a sort of a retro futuristic style, sort of almost a 1960s view of the future with that ray gun especially, and kind of an old computer console looking thing. And I think that's all fine. I think though that what we don't have here is a sense of what the whole setting is. So it's sort of like a few props. I'm not exactly sure what this thing is. And I think that, rather than a sketch, you could probably find loads of ray gun toys and stuff like that online that might make a better reference image than, this very simple sketch you have here. And actually, same with the computer console. You might look up, like an older computer from the, computer console from like the 1970s or 80s or something like that to get some more inspiration for what that could look like. I'm not sure what that is. I guess maybe a teleportation pad or something like that. But kind of in a sense move the camera back and give us a sense of the whole scene, and then also you get a bunch of photo reference or artwork reference. It could be drawings as well, but just other reference you find that kind of establishes the look of your scene. So I think you really need to keep going with this, and definitely really lay out what this whole scene looks like, what the environment around them is. Yeah, I can see from your description that that's a window. It's just, I don't know, it's a little hard to read. It's sort of odd looking, but again, and here's the corner where the floor and the wall meet. But I still think you kind of need to move back, the camera to give the whole area of what we're going to see, and then just a few more maybe furniture pieces or props or those kinds of things to get a bigger sense of the scene. Okay, this is Hayu. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing your name right. If any help with that would be appreciated. Yeah, I think you've got some basic ideas, but this looks very sketchy. It lacks perspective. The perspective's all wrong in the drawing, and there's really not a lot of detail to help with. So I think you need to do this again. Include a lot of photo reference images. Really think through the scene. Give it a little bit more style and character. Think about what kind of furniture, what kind of person would have that furniture, what sort of props would be there that sort of tell the story of the character. But right now these drawings look kind of very sketchy and rough, and I think you could do a lot better than what you've got here. This is Kareem, and you can see that you have this image in a Maya file. However, for me to be able to see the image in the Maya file, you have to create an archive scene. So here what it looks like right now is just this, and the reason I can't see this image plane is it's not embedded in the Maya file. It's just that Maya points to it, and you can see that it's in your documents folder on your computer. So to be able to send me a scene like this, you need to do File, Archive Scene, and you see it makes a zip file here. And if you send me that zip file, I'd have the Maya scene and the image file. There are a number of reference images here, which is good for kind of look and style. So yeah, all really good images. It gets to be a little bit complex and busy. Like something like this is it's a really well designed image, but it's also just a lot, to be able to model in the time we have. So, but certainly it's really nicely fleshed out. So, anyways, something to think about. But yeah, you've got good source images, good sense of style. I can't really tell if this one's a drawing that you did or if that's another reference image. I'm guessing that's one you did. But yeah, you've got some different variety here, from like kind of the very clean, sort of empty looking spaceship to the kind of rougher and more sort of, so it kind of reminds me of like an old submarine or something, where there's just loads of, technology kind of crowding everything. And I tend to like stuff that has a little bit more character to it, a little bit more, it's just a little bit more fleshed out than kind of the clean, stark environments. So find that balance, between something that's sort of doable given the amount of objects in there, and anything that kind of has repeating things, like you've got two of these, that's always kind of a good thing, because you could just model one and then duplicate it and move it, or stacks of whatever these things are, you can make one and then duplicate them. So there's some economies in there if you do go for an image more like this one, but kind of get all your ideas together in the form of a sketch. And again, maybe you have it, but I can't really see it very well on that because I just see the thumbnail. So maybe resubmit that. This is Michelle. It seems like we've got sort of a spaceship theme going on here. Yeah, I mean, it's good that you've kind of laid out a limited sort of space for this physically area. I think this kind of centerpiece prop is good. I think that you could flesh this out with some more detail, some additional furniture, maybe a chair. And just the consoles are a bit simple, so maybe adding buttons and levers or some other kind of element than just these kind of grid-like things. And yeah, this provides obviously a pretty good example. I can see a bit of a chair here, and you've got a lot more interesting layout in these different screens. And you kind of have to decide if you want to go with sort of the kind of featureless sort of touchscreen look or something a little bit more, you know, older with more physical kind of button switches and sliders and those kinds of things. So I tend to think that something that looks a little bit more tactile can be a little more appealing for scenes like these, and also give your character a little bit more to interact with than just sort of touchscreen looking things. But yeah, and maybe maybe a little bit more lived in looking. I don't know, maybe character has a cup of coffee or whatever they drink in future spaceship things. You could just think of add a little bit to kind of give it some character with these kind of modern, futuristic, clean, pristine environments. It's hard to give a sense of the character and the personality in the world unless there's look for things like flaws or something that tells you that someone lives and works in this environment. That can think of what that could be. This is Cindy, and one thing I like right away on this one is a little bit of what I was talking about with some of the other ones is some kind of backstory where it says the shop sells spices and loose leaf teas, but it's also a front for a thieves guild, and the character Clive is a thief, and he could be interacting with a prop there, and it just you can it's doing a bit of what I've been saying. It's like who are these characters and what kind of life do they live. Some of that's you've got this interesting kind of tree trunk table thing, and then a variety of different furniture and lots of little detail and shelves here, and even thoughtful about how the bar opens and closes here, and there's a little kind of secret trap door behind the bar. So a lot of nice kind of design built into, a lot of thought going into that. Oh, and I have this saved. Okay. So yeah, here's some more sketches of this. That's great. It looks like you put a lot of time and thought into this. And more reference images, details and texture, table inspiration, Outlander. I've actually seen some episodes of that. Yeah, I mean, this is great. Look at all that rich detail and even kind of lighting reference, and there's so many good ideas you could pull from this kind of image. Really helpful. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, lots of good references. Really thought through a number of different sketches. This is going well. I think you've got a really good start on this. I guess the only thing I would say is, oops, why does it want to not? There we go. Yeah, just make sure it's sort of you've covered the detail and the camera views you think you can limit it to, and then sort of just flesh out all of the areas that we'll see through the camera. Next up is Nicole, and as I mentioned in a couple of the other critiques, like I can't see your images in your My file unless you do archive scene. You just use file, archive scene, and send the zip file. If you watch some of the other critiques, you'll see that demonstrated there. But no matter, because we have the images in here anyway, and we can look at them right here. So yeah, very clean drawing. Yeah, it's an interesting environment. This seems to be a term with a lot of sci-fi space environments. Most of this looks good. There's some perspective issues, like the perspective doesn't look right, or these windows should be, the top and bottom should be following the perspective lines of the ceiling and those kinds of things. But that's not a big deal. I think it gives you a lot of information to figure out how you're going to lay out your scene. That looks good, interesting. Okay. A little bit off the track of the other stuff. That'd be a nice feature to have in there. Some good aquarium reference, bookshelf. Having a bar is the kind of thing that would, give us a hint about the personality of the character and tell us that it's sort of more of a lived-in space. Oh yeah, and here's the same thing, just with some colors on it. It's interesting color combos. See how that works out with some lighting. Yeah, you have the opportunity to have kind of unusual light sources in the scene, like maybe these oval shapes are light sources. So yeah, it's looking good. Yeah, just keep going with kind of integrating your kind of reference ideas in with this sketch. So to some extent they feel like they're a bit from two different worlds, and kind of finding a way to combine some of that more lived-in look with this very kind of clean modern thing would be interesting. This is Ahmad, and yeah, I think this looks good. I think it's the right idea. You know, just by virtue of it being a dojo, it tells you a little bit about the characters. I can understand where an environment like this would tend to be on the empty side, but at the same time, I would think to look for more things you could put in there just for the character to interact with. That also tells kind of the story of the space. And it looks like it's been, pretty straightforwardly taken from this image, which is fine. But even this has a little bit more detail and things like the ceiling beams and those kinds of things that you can draw from. And in fact, if you're just, using the photo, then you can just use the photo. I don't think, your drawing necessarily adds a lot to that. It's just more of just a drawing of this photo than something that kind of incorporates the references from multiple images. So maybe get some more dojo images and just look for what you could add to the scene to just kind of flesh it out a little bit. Again, given the understanding that a room like this would tend to be intentionally fairly empty to give the the martial artist room to move around and that kind of thing. But I still think you could do more to give it some character background. This is Chen. This is another one where I wouldn't be able to see your drawings inside the Maya file. The drawings are not embedded in the Maya file. It just points to them, and you have to use archive scene if you want to include them that way. So you may just want to post the drawings here later, but I can kind of get the idea from the image. It's basically just the fences with the trees in it, based on these images. So we can take a look at these. Yeah, I think some details like, having the lemons in there, or, these rocks on the ground and these roots and stuff, and a little bit of the uneven terrain makes it a little bit more interesting than, adding a little hedge and some other greenery and potted plants. All those little details help kind of flesh out the area a little bit. So I think this could work for this class, and you have obviously some good photo reference, and it looks like a place that you can just visit too and get your inspiration from as well. But make sure to add some of the little details that we're seeing that kind of bring the whole scene to life. And then it'd be great to see your drawings a little more closely. This is Hayden, and let's take a look at the sketch here. I think that looks good. I think it definitely gives a sense of the place, and tells a little bit about the character based on these things he's left behind, and that there's a chair knocked on its side. I think some additional photo reference of things like the chairs and some detail of what they would look like would be helpful. Yeah, there's this one as well. Yeah, again, a photo reference for the look of the windows and the rifles and those kinds of things, and the door would be really helpful just to get a bit of a better sense of proportion and the details that those things would have. You had a question about the chair. You wanted to duplicate it, and let me just show you that. Oh, also the file name is last name, first name. Obviously you'd want to include your actual name in future submission. Okay, so here we are in Maya, and let's take a look at the chair. Again, the chairs here is a little bit overly simple. I think you should get some photo reference for the chair you want to build. But the thing to do here would be to select the different pieces. I'm just holding down Shift and whoops, and then group it. So you can do Control G or Edit Group. One option that's good to have is to center the pivot. And then when you go to move it, W for move, you see the pivot in the center, and then that all moves together. And if you wanted to duplicate it, Control D, you could duplicate it together, rotate it, scale it if you wanted to. So that would be the way to work with multiple pieces that make up a greater whole. This is really interesting, and I'm not clear if you plan to build this or if we're just meant to already be inside of this, but yeah, really interesting image of all that kind of living space inside that plane. But again, I'm not exactly clear. Are you building the whole plane, or are we just sort of a little bit of the interior, or what that could look like? So yeah, let me know. This is Bohan, otherwise known as Bob, and again, I've mentioned this a few times over the course of this whole critique, but I can't see your images inside your Maya file unless you've also included them. The best way to do that inside of Maya is to do File Archive, and that'll create a zip file that includes all those. But no worries, we can see what it looks like here. Looks like some schematic drawing. It's interesting. It's a little bit hard for me to tell what's going on there. This one kind of explains it a bit better. Yeah, it looks like sort of a futuristic scene. You've got really good perspective drawing skills, and really giving it a sense of space. And I like this large prop in the middle, though I don't know how to imagine what what it actually does. And yeah, this a lot of good reference images here to give a kind of a look of his style. It's interesting how many people are doing like a futuristic thing this term. Somehow it's turned into a big theme with everybody. I don't know if you were inspired by each other, or it's all just coincidence, but it's fine. It's just unusual. But again, yeah, whatever you can do to make it look, same things I've been saying with a lot of the other ones, where you want it to look lived in, you want it to help tell the story of the character a little bit. Who they are, where they're from, what kind of world they live in, any kind of habits, good or bad, that have had an effect on the environment, and so the environment can kind of tell a story of the character. So think about that a little bit for your scene. And yeah, it's a little bit easier to tell what's going on here. So yeah, it looks fairly fleshed out. So I think you've got enough going on. Maybe a few more creature comforts, like some furniture or other things you would have an environment where people are hanging out a lot, but other than that, that's looking good.